Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to Anderson House here in Washington, D.C. My name is Andrew Allen, and I am the Historical Programs Manager for the American Revolution Institute of the Society of the Cincinnati. The American Revolution Institute promotes knowledge and appreciation for the achievement of American independence by supporting advanced study, exhibitions and other historical programs and tours, advocating preservation, and providing resources to classrooms that benefits teachers, students, and scholars alike. Since 1938, the Society of the Cincinnati has done all this work from its headquarters right here at Anderson House, a National Historic Landmark, finished in 1905 as the winter residence of Lars and Isabel Anderson. Today's Lunch Bite features the American Revolution Institute's Research Services Librarian Rachel Nellis, discussing a series of 4 1778 prints produced by English caricaturists Matthew and Mary Darley, satirizing the Carlisle Peace Commission, a failed attempt to negotiate peace with Congress. Rachel is again the Research Services Librarian here at the Institute, where she facilitates use of the reading room along with the many resources within the library. Originally from Batavia, Illinois, Rachel attended the University of Texas at Austin and earned her Master's of Science in Information Studies with a concentration in archives in 2016. After moving to Washington, D.C. that same year, she was an intern at NPR before serving as an archivist at the Cosmos Club right across the street from our headquarters. Rachel joined the professional staff of the American Revolution Institute in July of 2019, and one of Rachel's major projects here has been building and maintaining the Institute's digital library. So if you've accessed that recently, you have Rachel to thank for that. But before I turn things over to Rachel, as usual, there are a few housekeeping items to address for those of you attending on Zoom with us today. Following today's lunch bite, there will be a question and answer session. So please feel free to submit your questions for Rachel using the question and answer function found at the bottom of your screen. Should you have any technical related questions, feel free to comment in the chat using the chat function also found at the bottom of your screen. One of our staff members will be monitoring that and will do their best to assist you. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Rachel Nellis.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming. As Andrew said, I'm Rachel Nellis. I'm a librarian here at the American Revolution Institute, and today I'll be talking about 4 prints from our Robert Charles Lawrence Ferguson collection, published in April and May of 1778 in Matthias and Mary Darley's London shop. These 4 prints depict and satirize the ill-fated Carlisle Peace Commission. There we go. So for a little background, we have to go back to the Battle of Saratoga in the fall of 1777. The British were shocked by Burgoyne's loss at Saratoga. They were facing rumors of a Franco-American alliance, which was sealed February of 1778. The Carlisle Peace Commission was created out of the desperation created by this loss. King George III was fearful of the French officially recognizing American independence, and with rumors swirling, backtracked on his previous refusal of a reconciliation plan with the Americans. Lord North, the Prime Minister, pushed through Parliament bills authorizing a new peace commission. Instructions for the newly adopted peace commission were completed late March 1778. The commission could offer nearly everything except independence, including the repeal of the Tea Act and Massachusetts Government Act, home rule, pardons, and the restoration of trade. The Peace Commission was to be led by Frederick Howard, the 5th Earl of Carlisle, and the other 4 members were named General William Howe, Commander-in-Chief of the British Army until 1778, Admiral Lord Richard Howe, brother of William and British Naval Commander. And then it's important to note that the Howe brothers served on a previous peace commission in 1776 that ended in failure as well. They could only offer pardons for anyone who had signed an oath of allegiance. And the brothers, though named to the 1778 commission, did not participate due to disagreements with Parliament and being upset about Lord Carlisle leading the commission. And then we have William Eden, 1st Baron Auckland, a British diplomat who sat in the House of Commons, and George Johnstone, a naval officer. With the House declining to participate, that left Lord Carlisle, William Eden, and George Johnstone to leave for America in late April 1778. Prior to setting sail, the commissioners had sent proposals to Congress to review, but the Franco-American Treaty was in the works, having been signed in February of 1778, and it was about to be ratified by Congress in early May. So this left Americans with no intentions of settling a peace, and Congress declared on April 22nd, that these United States cannot, with propriety, hold any conference or treaty with any commissioners on the part of Great Britain, unless they shall, as a preliminary thereto, either withdraw their fleets and armies, or else, in positive and express terms, acknowledge the independence of the said states. The commission felt set up for failure. The commission was stationed in the United States for 6 months, except for Johnstone, whose attempts to bribe members of Congress failed and left for England early. For these months, the commission published propaganda published propaganda, including a manifesto and proclamation, published as a broadside and reprinted in many newspapers across the United States at the time. And it was signed by Carlisle, Eden, and Henry Clinton. The manifesto was a last-ditch effort at reconciliation by publicly conceding to everything the Americans had wanted, except for independence. A paragraph read, "To the members of Congress then, we again declare that we are ready to concur in all satisfactory and just arrangements for securing to them and their respective constituents the reestablishment of peace, with the exemption from any imposition of taxes by the Parliament of Great Britain, and the irrevocable enjoyment of every privilege consistent with the union of interest and force on which our mutual prosperity and the safety of our common religion and liberties depend." The mission was a failure. Without acknowledging independence, Congress completely ignored the commission and resolved not to engage in negotiations. In late 1778, the commissioners returned to England. So, of course, the exploits were covered in a variety of ways, significantly in the newspapers, where their letters to congressmen were published. The manifesto appeared there and satires followed. American satirists covered the event in print. An example of this is on the screen from the New York Packet, a parody on the British Commissioner's Manifesto and Proclamation, published November 10th, 1778. It begins, "To public bodies and to all, that colonies we late did call, Eden, Sir Harry, and my lord, all men of mighty power in word, do write unto the world at large their long last speech and dying charge." And then it goes on, "Well then, if Congress will disclaim their horrid independent name, we promise to take special care that they shall never more declare United States of Colonies, or call the French their good allies, things which required the full consent of all and each constituent. We therefore crave all ranks of men to think this matter o'er again." This event was highly criticized and covered in England as well. And it was covered more popularly in satirical prints. Satirical prints were reactionary to war and world conflict. They were advertised in newspapers, shop windows were full of them, and they were widely circulated, being put up in the walls of taverns and inns. It's clear that the public who they were being advertised to were probably upper middle class. They were literate in current affairs. Satirical prints could be unintelligible if you didn't understand the inscription, the coded iconography, or didn't keep up with politics at the time. It wasn't too dissimilar to political cartoons today. And in doing research for this presentation, I thought that Joan Dolmetsch put it best, saying, "Readers of today's newspapers and magazines are thoroughly familiar with cartoons, pictures drawn to accompany a written commentary, and generally sarcastic, humorous, or prophetic in content. Whatever the subject, the intent is to sway the reader's opinion toward that of the commentator." In the 18th century, caricatures depicted grotesque or ludicrous representations of persons or situation achieved through exaggeration, ridicule, or denunciation. As you'll see later in the presentation, the Darley's satirical prints certainly fit into all of these categories. First, they are in a way prophetic. I think most people could have guessed that the commission would fail and that it was a dead end, but the Darleys published the 4 commissioner satires before they were even in Philadelphia. Secondly, whether it's the commissioner's clothing, faces, or their accoutrement, they are generally ludicrous representations of the people and circumstances they're depicting. These prints were supposed to be ugly and not beautiful, and many amateur creators made them, which adds to the crudeness. So before getting to the Darleys, I want to point out that the images of them on the screen, the one on the right is a self-portrait by Matthew Darley himself from 1771, and it was the frontispiece in one of their published books. The one on the left is maybe Mary Darley. It's annotated as Mary Darley by the print's previous owner, Horace Walpole, but it might not be Mary. But either way, I really like that she is holding a caricature in her hand within the caricature. So Matthew, who's also known as Matthias, he used both names, and Mary were a husband and wife printmaking duo. Matthew Darley was probably born around 1720, and he was a designer of household items, an engraver, and a print seller. He at one time even apprenticed for a clockmaker and worked for famed furniture designer Thomas Chippendale, for whom he engraved designs for his publications. His design work also brought him the title of publisher. He published many books on design and architecture, and he was known for his character business most of his life. In the 1750s, after the 7 Years' War had begun, Matthew, along with the other creators at the time, served as the etcher for a popular line of caricature drawings mocking the Duke of Cumberland. And this work led to him and others being rounded up by the English government for questioning about the satirical prints. It's thought that Mary was Matthew's second or third wife. She was born around 1736 and established herself along with her husband as a printmaker, publisher, and caricaturist, even referring to herself as the fun merchant at the Acorn and Riders Court. Many of the prints produced by the pair are imprinted with M. Darley, which is attributed to them being published by Mary Darley, even though it's often thought that Matthew served as the main etcher and engraver. Mary Darley was an incredibly accomplished woman. As a writer, illustrator, and publisher, she's known for having published the first book on caricature drawing, a book of caricature, in 1762, for the instruction of young gentlemen and ladies. Mary wrote a definition of caricature in her introduction. Caricature is the burlesque of character or an exaggeration of nature when not very pleasing. It's a manner of drawing that has and still is held in great esteem, both by the Italians and French. Some of our nobility and gentry at this time do equal, if not excel, anything of the kind that ever has been done in any other country. 'Tis the most diverting species of designing, and will certainly keep those that practice it out of the hippo or vapors, and that it may have such an effect on her friends is the wish of Mary Darley. This first shop, their first shop as a couple was opened in 1762 at the Acorn and Riders Court. The main purpose of the shop was to teach amateur artists how to draw and etch their own caricatures. In a newspaper from 1762, Mary created an advertisement that encouraged gentlemen and ladies to bring their own sketches to the shop to be engraved or etched. They went on to sell these amateur works, which proved to be very popular. The Darleys were also the first to hold caricature exhibitions at their shops, and at these events, visitors would bring their own drawing to display, and they could walk away with one print of their choosing. After moving into the Acorn shop, Mary chose her principal target for caricature, Lord Bute, an advisor to the newly appointed King George III, and 16 years later, he would make another appearance in one of the commissioner's prints. So in 1766, the Darleys moved their shop to 39 Strand, as seen here in this wonderful print titled The Macaroni Print Shop from 1772. And I really like this print because you can see the caricatures in the windows. And I think the one that might be Mary Darley is actually in one of the windows as well. But I like that it's caricatures looking at caricatures. It gets a little meta. So during this time at 39 Strand, the Darleys moved away from these strictly political satires and published more satirical prints on fashion and popular figures, including their famed caricatures of women's hair fashions, like this one from our collection titled Bunker's Hill or America's Headdress, which was published in 1776. You can see the woman's massive hair that holds the battle, including cannons, gunfire, and flags waving. And the Darleys are considered to be some of the first artists to meld caricature with political satire. So now we can talk about the prints in our collection after all of that context. We have the 4 Darley prints made about the commission, 2 from April and 2 from May, but all before the commissioners even stepped foot in Philadelphia. The first is primarily satire, while the second combines both caricature and satire. The first print, The Commissioners, was published on April 1st, 1778 by M. Darley. It mocks the delegation that was to be sent to America. The commissioners kneel on the right, while America, personified as a Native American woman, is seated with her back slightly to the commissioners on the left, on top of barrels labeled tobacco for Germany, tobacco for Holland, rice for France, etc. In short, it's depicting America's trade prospects and England's commercial losses. Obviously, England isn't on any of that cargo, so they're losing out. America has a laurel wreath halo symbolizing victory, and the liberty cap on a pole symbolizing freedom and liberty. The commissioners kneel before America, groveling at her feet with their 5 swords laid on the foreground, probably a gesture of peace, with speech bubbles numbered 1 through 5, corresponding with the kneeling commissioners, also numbered 1 through 5. The first 2 commissioners are thought to be the Howe brothers. So one says, "We have blocked up your ports, obstructed your trade with the hope of starving ye, and contrary to the law of nations, compelled your sons to war against their brethren." The second says, "We have ravaged your lands, burnt your towns, and caused your captive heroes to perish by cold, pestilence, and brought us thus on our knees before ye." The third, "We have profaned your places of divine worship, derided your virtue and piety, and scoffed at that spirit which has brought us thus on our knees before ye." The fourth, "We have ravaged, scalped, and murdered your people, even from tender infancy to decrepit age, although supplicating for mercy." And lastly, "For all which material services we the commissioners, from the most pious and best of sovereigns, doubt not your cordial duty and affection towards us, or willingness to submit yourselves again to receive the same whenever we have power to bestow it on ye." All of these words represent England admitting to committing wrongs against the Americans, begging for her forgiveness, and obviously suggesting that she come back to them. This first print is interesting due to its inclusion of the Howe brothers, who, as we know at this point, did not actually participate in the commission. So it's either a mistake or the Darleys just weren't aware yet. Their second print is titled "The Commissioners' Interview with Congress." There's a typo in commissioners in the title, which I really like. Also published on April 1st, 1778. And it corrects the mistake from the first and includes only the 3 commissioners, Carlisle, Eden, and George Johnstone. Typically, any important political figures would have certain features that these makers would standardize across satires. So between these first 2 prints, you can kind of figure out who is who by matching the similarities. I'm pretty sure Carlisle is in the front with his tobacco box, and he is also holding a tobacco box in the first commissioners as well. It's fun to look at the similarities. The commissioners are seen on the left, seemingly gesturing to the members of Congress, who are dressed in fur-trimmed gowns and hats that one scholar mentions are reminiscent of the Liberty Cap. The Congress members look to be in charge of the negotiations, while the commissioners appear nervous, unkempt, and out of their element. And one can view this print as an indication that the Darleys, and probably popular opinion, viewed the commissioners as incapable of negotiating this peace, and foolish for even trying. When I first looked at this print, I really couldn't figure out the congressmen's outfits. So I tried to find an explanation, and I found one in one of the many books I was looking at that says, "Darley's inspiration for the design may have derived from a speech delivered by the Duke of Richmond, following reports that one member of the Colonial Congress had worn such a woolen cap during a council session. The Duke decried the necessity that required British noblemen of European manner and polish to negotiate with such peasants. This print also features Lord Bute, placed in the middle of the print wearing Scottish attire and looking like he has a stomach ache during the negotiations. I mentioned him before as one of Mary's early targets. He was a Scottish royal and a favorite of King George III, he served as prime minister from 1762 to 63. He's actually known for negotiating the peace that ended the 7 Years' War with France. But he never stepped foot in America during the Revolutionary War, but many believed that he was making policy decisions behind the scenes during that time. The final two satirical prints are in the form of two rebus political letters, one from Britannia, published on May 6, 1778, and one from America, published on May 11th. Rebus puzzles are one of the older forms of satirical art and something I'm sure we've all interacted with before in some way. It replaces letters and sometimes whole words with pictures. And I actually still struggle to read these rebuses on the table sometimes unless I have the key in front of me. So you'll get symbols like an I for the letter I, a toe for the word to, a yew tree for you or the letter U, etc. Reading rebuses relies on hieroglyphics and phonograms. The hieroglyphics represent straightforward words, as you see here. There's a globe for world, a ship for ship, a coat for coat. For the phonograms, you're juxtaposing multiple images or an image within a word, like a can and a not for cannot. There are also symbols that some modern audiences may not understand, but were well known in the 18th century, like the woman leaning on the anchor for hope, the snake, the symbol of unity, colonial union. And also I just found that the awl tool was used very frequently within the rebuses. So for the two rebuses, I've included a key on the side of them with telling you what the symbol is, and then I'll just read to you what it actually says. So the first rebus, Britannia to America. My dear daughter, I cannot behold without great pain your headstrong backwardness to return to your duty in not opposing all the good I long intended for your sole happiness and being. Told that you have given your hand to a base and two-faced Frenchman, I have sent you 5 over-wise men, the greatest of all my children, to put you to rights, and hope you will listen to them and mind what they say to you. They have instructions to give you those things you formerly required. So be a good girl, discharge your soldiers and ships of war, and do not rebel against your mother. Rely upon me and do not consort to what that French rascal shall tell you. I see he wants to bring on an enmity to all union between you, and I but listen not to him. All the world takes notice of his double face. I'll send him such messages for my great guns as shall make his heart repent and know that one good or ill turn merits another. Let not take too much hold of your heart. I am your friend and mother. There's also no punctuation, so sometimes it's a little difficult to read because of that too. So we see here Britannia asking that America, despite their new alliance with France, return to her. She'll be sending the 5 commissioners, the best they have to offer, to grant the rights Americans previously wanted before their push for independence. It's a little passive aggressive. And if you read the October 3rd manifesto or any of the letters from the commissioners that were published in the papers, it's actually not that far off from the real correspondence going on at the time. There's also a fun little mistake in this print from the 4th line up from the bottom. Someone had to caret an A into the word make, which I like. So the second rebus is in response to Britannia, titled America to Her Mistaken Mother. Here, America is again represented by a Native American woman, the most frequent symbol for America at the time. She holds a 13-striped flag in one hand and a fleur-de-lis in the other, and sits behind a 13-star shield, indicating independence and alliance with France. It reads, you silly old woman, that you have sent a dove to us is very plain, to draw our attention from our real interests, but we are determined to abide by our own ways of thinking. Your 5 children you have sent to us shall be treated as visitors and safely sent home again. You may consult them and admire them, but you must not expect one of your puppets will come home to you as sweet as you sent him. 'Twas cruel to send so pretty a man so many thousand miles, and to have the fatigue of returning back after tearing his coat and dirtying those red-heeled boots. If you are wise, follow your own advice you gave to me. Take home your warship, soldiers. Guard well your trifling, and leave me to myself, as I am at age to know my own interests without your foolish advice, and know that I shall always regard you and my brothers as relations, but not as friends. I am your greatly injured daughter, America. So again, references to the commissioners in America, satirically pitying them for having to take the journey to America only to be immediately turned away with no discussion. So the parody of the manifesto that I shared earlier from the American newspaper, I think it's actually very similar to the Rebus's, actually, the actual content, and to the word bubbles from the first satire. I think there was a common language in satire at the time, and the Darleys were leaders in this field. It's also interesting to look at these prints and recognize that the Darleys were pro-American. In fact, many of the satires made in England were very sympathetic to the American cause, and they had been since the Stamp Act. So with that, all 4 of these prints are available on our digital library, where you can look at them at home if you want to, and we even have the Battle of Bunkers Hill up there as well. Yeah, I think that's about all I have.
Yeah.
Anyone has questions?
So how are these received in England? These are critical for the commissioner, supportive of the American cause, and the Darleys seem to have been successful printers, but it's criticized or
Yeah. So the question was, how were these received in England? Did other people agree with these pro-American sentiments? I'm finding that I think a lot of English people at the time were very pro-American, at least like the regular citizens. And I know that the Darleys prints actually sold really well. They made over, I think, like 300 prints, kind of about all of these subjects. And I think based on my research, yeah, they were all supportive of Americans, and I think tired of the war and kind of knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere and it was starting to hurt their own land and economy and things like that. So, yes.
Were they supportive of the Americans to the extent that they were for independence? They were for independence of Americans?
The question was, were they so supportive of the Americans that they were supportive of independence? I actually don't fully know the answer to that question, but I would kind of think that, yeah, they were supportive of them being an independent state at that point, just to kind of end everything. And
Since that's the one thing that wasn't in the
yeah, right. Yes.
Are the original documents here? Sorry, are they here?
Yeah, the 4 prints that I'm talked about today are actually on the table up here, and you're all welcome to take a look at them after this. Yes. Yes. So the 4 prints are part of the American Revolution Institute's library collections as part of the Robert Charles Lawrence Ferguson collection, which is a collection we maintain that focuses on the art of war, whether that's military manuals or prints like these, kind of demonstrating the different ways people fought wars.
I missed the beginning. Where were the Darleys from? Where were they from?
The Darleys, they were from England. I'm assuming they were born in the London area. And that's just where they were the whole time. No, they were English.
What were the distribution channels for their prints? Were they published? Were they privately distributed, posted?
The question was, what were the distribution channels for the prints? They would post them in their windows so people could walk by. They kind of held those political salons where people could shop around the store. They were advertised in newspapers as well, I believe. So people knew when a new one was coming. I don't actually know how many imprints of each one were made, but I'm sure that I would imagine that once you had them, you kind of circulated them with your friends and laughed about it, or they were also posted in public spaces like taverns and stuff. So. Yes.
Used just for fun, or were they strictly used for political?
So the question was, were these used just for fun or strictly for political humor? They were actually, I mean, initially, they aren't supposed to necessarily be funny. They are supposed to be sending a clear message and kind of trying to sway public opinion about certain things. I think as the art continued to grow, they got more comical. And that's when I was talking about how the Darleys were the first to kind of combine the comical caricature with the political satire. Like I would say the first two prints I showed probably weren't viewed as comical images. They were just trying to get a point across in a simple way that a lot of people could understand. Okay. So the question is, were rebuses a form of like intelligence for spies to pass along information? I feel like I don't know that answer, actually. It's a good question.
Following on that, was there a large precedent of writing in this form, graphic code, which and what drove that? Did it just make it more fun and interesting to decipher, to capture your attention beyond a standard letter? Or was this a prevailing art form or methodology at the time?
I think it was a prevailing art form. I kind of feel like the rebuses might be meant to be more fun graphically to read and like a puzzle to figure out. So
it forces or adds an element of engagement, but doesn't change the information.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And it's a little bit like crossword puzzles where there is a standard, once you do a lot of them, you sort of learn how to do them.
Yeah, kind of like what I was saying earlier, like a lot of these symbols, most people probably would have understood and been able to read it pretty easily, I bet, or at least could figure it out pretty quickly. Whereas today, I don't know how many of us could just look at it and know what it's saying.
I thought I could do that the first diagram, but you got it far more fun.
Well, I have it printed, so. All right, well, you're all welcome to come up to the front and look at the prints or chat.
Thank you.